I'm especially pleased to have this honor because I knew of your speaker before I knew her personally, but along with the saying, build a better mousetrap and so forth, this little program that started some 30 years ago in Dayton, Ohio, is a full-fledged, big oral public day school. And this stands out in the thoughts of people who are in special education because years ago, when we realized that the job wasn't being done in a residential environment, that the child should benefit from the home and the normal community, as the oral day programs began, many fell by the wayside through the years. A few of them held their own, and others became nationally known. The program that you'll hear about tonight is one that has grown, and parents and teachers across the nation have watched it with admiration because there has been a knack of working from the advantages of the old and applying new techniques and new ideas to make it a better school each year. Your speaker began, as many of you did, in thinking she wanted to go in a different direction. Her undergraduate work was in French and English, and this was in an Ohio college, Muskingum, but she was interested in the field of teaching to the point that when she was almost lured into an experience in the State School for the Deaf in Michigan, she took training there and taught there briefly and was again interested enough that she went on in the special area of the deaf at Columbia University, getting her graduate degree in cooperation with Lexington in New York. It is an outstanding program that you're hearing, but even more outstanding, the kind of person that you're going to listen to. May I present Ms. Cobra, principal of the Dayton Kennedy Day School for the Deaf.
Thank you, Mrs. Richardson. And I understand this is the student body of CEC and guests and friends that are here tonight. In starting, I would like to read to you from the California State Department of Education for Emotionally Handicapped Children. Any society that insists upon all its children of school age attending school should also insist that the attendance be profitable to the children and to society. To insist upon compulsory attendance of children who fail to learn and in time learn to fail, and for whom school attendance becomes a millstone around their necks, is to insist upon an illness or crime and parental and vocational ineptitude. Education in a democracy does not mean the same education for each child. Children have little choice. They must go to school. The community, therefore, also has little choice. It must provide adequate education for each child or be prepared to deal with the consequences. Now, this was the thinking of the schools in Ohio some 30 years ago about its deaf children. In about 1930, up till about 1930, the bulk of all deaf children went to the state school at Columbus and were sent there during the whole year, lived there, and returned home only for vacations. This was the type of training that I had in the beginning. As Mrs. Richardson told you, I started out in French and English and prepared to teach in high school, although at the same time I took elementary education training, so I could teach either place. But when I graduated from high school, or from college, there wasn't the demand for teachers that there is today. And I didn't get a job right away. Well, I didn't care too much for this. I was at home in a small town for a while, but I soon left home and went to Flint, Michigan, where I had two sisters, one in college, teaching in the college, and one in the elementary school there. And I thought, well, this would be a place at least I could get a job. So I was out job hunting after I got there, and I walked into a building with big columns in the front of the building, and wanted to know if I could have a job. I went into an office in there and asked if I could have a job. I said, I just graduated from college, and I would like to have some kind of a job. And the gentleman there said, do you know where you are? And I said, no. And he said, you are at the Michigan State School for the Deaf. And if you will stay here, live in the dormitories, and take care of 16 little deaf girls after school hours, you may take the training for teaching deaf children during the day while they are in school. So this is what I did. I stayed during the year, that year, I lived with 16 little deaf children, slept in the same dormitory with them, and I really learned what deaf children are like from this experience. The following year, I taught a kindergarten program at the Michigan State School for the Deaf to pay for my education. But all the time I was there, and all of the year that I taught there, I was not content. Here were little 5-year-old youngsters living in dormitories, lining up in rows, standing before a basin, taking turns to wash their hands, standing in line, waiting to get into the dining room, or waiting to be taken care of in the dining room. On the playground, the boys were in one section and the girls were in another, and lo and behold, if one crossed over that line, what might happen to them? I don't think it's quite as bad now, but this was the way it was when I was there, and I didn't think it was very normal. So I made up my mind at this time that I wanted to go into a program where the children could live with their parents and be at home, and the parents could take responsibility for part of their teaching. Who would be more interested in the child than the parent? So I came to Ohio after that, and I had also started my work on my master's degree and learned the methods that are used at Lexington Avenue School for the Deaf, which is speech and lip reading and the natural language approach. And this seemed to me the most sensible way of teaching a deaf child. So I became very interested in it and was determined that this was the type of work that I would get into. I didn't come to Dayton the first year I was in Ohio. I was in a little town in the northern part of Ohio. And I had a principal who was quite interesting, although somewhat unusual, but I also learned a great deal from her. But the second year I taught, I moved to Dayton and had the preschool class of children. I struggled with these youngsters, and at that time I had 17 by myself. And I had those for about, I had 17 youngsters or 18 for about 5 years of my teaching before the state of Ohio passed a law that no teacher should handle more than 8 deaf children at a time. When I had my first class of 8 children, I thought, this is going to be easy after handling 17 youngsters between the ages of 3 and 10. And it was easier, but you see, Dayton schools were growing too at this time, and we were able to classify the youngsters better. I saw at this time, through the guidance of my principal at that time, Miss Evelyn Humphreys, that if the school program could be a little larger, that you could grade the youngsters to a better degree and therefore have more children of one kind in one class, you see. This didn't take place in just a year. The first year I was in Dayton, we had 48 youngsters, I believe. Now we have 177 children at Kennedy School, and our classes are well graded. We have a preschool which handles 22 children this year with 2 trained teachers working in the same classroom. The morning teacher is responsible for the children who come to school in the morning. She is helped by a trained teacher in her work. Then in the afternoon, the other teacher becomes the main teacher, and the morning teacher becomes a helper. Now this has several good features about it, but the main good feature is that the classes can be broken up into small groups, and the teachers can handle fewer when it comes to speech and lip reading and the things that the teacher has to get close to the child for. From our preschool, we have by this time determined the children who need more time and more help. We have kindergarten, 2 different kindergarten classes, and one is a kindergarten that can move at a rapid pace, and the other is a slower moving kindergarten. Now these youngsters may stay in kindergarten 1 or 2 years. They may stay in preschool 1 or 2 years, depending on the time that is needed. Our school is really what you might call an ungraded school. We're graded for the purposes of reporting attendance only. But other than that, they move as they can move. If we find a child in the preschool who can do first grade work, we don't hesitate to put him in first grade, even if it's only Thanksgiving. It doesn't matter. We have the grades 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, through the 8th grade in our building at Kennedy. And we have 2 classes at the high school level, one of which is slow learning deaf, and the other is an integrated deaf high school class. At Kennedy, we also have 3 classes of slow learning deaf children. The state law, some 10 years ago, designated that we could no longer cut off the children at a 70 IQ, which we used to be able to do, but we had to move back to 50 and take all children from 50 IQ up. So we do have slow learning classes of deaf children in the school. This program is handled at our school by a person who has been trained in slow learning and has also had, over and above this, her training in deaf education. She does, 2 of the teachers do magnificent jobs. Our 3rd slow learning class is at the high school level, and I am somewhat disturbed by the teaching here. It's a little bit more difficult to manage. For one thing, it's out of the building, and I'm not there every day. But I think that we will get the problems worked out eventually. I'd like to go back a little bit to tell you about how we get these deaf children in our school. In the first place, they are not all from Dayton. Approximately 1/3 of the children are from Dayton proper. But as you know, Dayton is surrounded by little suburbs all the way around. Kettering here, Oakwood here, so forth. We have many children from these outlying districts, as many as 6 counties around Dayton. These youngsters are brought into school daily by Crippled Children's Society buses, by any means of transportation that their school district can work out. I'll take Piqua for an example. They have a busload of children that they pick up from Piqua or the Piqua area and bring into Dayton, not only deaf, but blind, crippled, and so forth. The Crippled Children's Society has furnished a bus and furnishes a driver, and these children are delivered to us and then taken home in the evening. Other school districts have arranged different things. They hire individual drivers with station wagons and so forth. Each school district, however, who sends children into the Dayton school must be responsible for the means of transportation, for collecting the cost of transportation from the State Board of Education, and they must transfer tuition funds into the Dayton schools for this child. These children are accepted when they have a hearing loss of 65 decibels or more into our school. They must have a deficiency in speech, that is to say, no speech. The children who can get along with hearing aids and get along in the public school are not accepted in our program. And you can understand this. It would be defeating the purpose. If a child has language and has speech, normal speech, he would be very much slowed down by our program. So we do not take these children. They can receive special help from the Dayton Hearing and Speech Center, and of course they can wear a hearing aid and get help in the public school from the hearing and speech therapist, but they do not attend a special school. Our children must have a mental age of 4 when we take them in our program. Before this, they attend the Hearing and Speech Center for training until they reach this point. We used to take youngsters a little younger than this, but the numbers grew too fast. We went into the building that we are in now in 1955, and at the time that the school opened in 55, we had 4 vacant classrooms. Now we have 6 classrooms in cubbyholes of Patterson Elementary School, of which we are a wing. All of our building is full, and 6 makeshift classrooms in the school which we are connected to. I understand that there are to be about 40 youngsters, deaf and aphasic, that we will probably get in our program next year. And you can understand what kind of a problem this is going to pose for the Dayton Board of Education. Where will they house these 40 children? To my knowledge, we will graduate 4 this year, and that's not going to make room for 40. In the beginning, we must teach our youngsters lip reading. The preschool children do not know how much about lip reading, although they have had some training previously at the Dayton Hearing and Speech Center. So this is the first lesson that is given to the child as he comes to school. The teacher usually has goldfish in the room, and usually there's a parent there with a baby. The teacher takes each child with a picture of the baby and a picture of a goldfish and little objects to the real objects and tells them that this is a baby and this is a fish. Then after several days of doing this, the teacher will take the picture and the little objects by themselves and say to the child, and maybe the child will do nothing, or maybe he will make some kind of move, because it's very strange to a little child who doesn't ever hear a voice to know what you're making those funny faces for. So if the child doesn't do anything, the teacher takes his hand and picks up the little object and puts it on the picture, a fish on a fish, and a baby on a baby. Then, after many days of doing this, the teacher will take the pictures and the objects again and say to the child, she begins to see a little light dawn in the child's face, and he looks down here and he picks up the fish and puts it where it belongs. And you can see, do not look anything alike, so the child has a good chance of getting this. When he can lip read 2 words, she will add another. During the first year, the child usually learns approximately 50 words, or maybe more if he's pretty bright. Then he has the problem of learning speech. Speech is, too, a different process from what we normally call speech, because he has nothing to base his opinion on. He doesn't know what we're talking about. When you say, now, we're going to have a speech lesson today, well, that you might just as well keep quiet, because he doesn't know what you're talking about. So with the group hearing aid on, and with the light flashing, if you have this attached to your hearing aid, and through touch, and with feathers and anything else that you can use, you start in on a program of speech. And this is to teach the child an element of speech. Not ABCs as we know it, but an element. For instance, we usually choose M as the first one. And the child's hand is put on the teacher's face. And he has his hearing aids on. And the little light that vibrates when sound is made is attached. And the teacher says, and the child notices that little light flickering, you see. He also notices the way her mouth is held, and he feels the vibration here in her face. So he said, so she puts his hand on his own face, and he tries to do the same. And if he has success in getting the light to flicker, you see, well, that's fun. He'll try that again. And this is the way the speech is built up, sound by sound. Then we teach ah. This is pretty easy. As long as the child doesn't get his tongue too far back in his throat, he can say it. And then we say, now we're going to put these together. We'll say, ah, and so the child does this, and the teacher says, now let's go faster. Ah, and pretty soon he's saying, ma, and you have a word. So immediately you pull out your cards and a picture of Mama and the doll, the Mama doll, and you say, Mama. Well, then the child's very proud of this, you see. He has a word, and he can go around and show anybody this Mama doll and say Mama. This is his first word. He learns perhaps 25 to 30 words during the year if he is pretty good, and if speech comes easily to him. Now, with our hearing aid equipment and other equipment, we have more success in getting speech than we used to have. We have J. Warren group aids, 4 of which are the walk-away, working off of a loop around the room, and the child wears merely a little battery box around his waist, and he wears a headset with his own individual microphone. He's not plugged in anywhere, which we do have to do in some of our rooms. And this gives him the freedom of the room, or he can turn to microphone and he can walk into the hall, into the dining room, and into the office and still hear. He knows, he is taught that all he has to do is flip the switch and he's on the air either place. We have these in 6 classrooms. 2 of our units are the EFI, Electronics Future Incorporated. And these are really wonderful instruments. although they're sensitive. You have to watch them, but they're extremely easy to use. I understand, too, that they now have the cordless microphone, which would make it so much easier for the teacher. Because, see, she still has to be attached. She doesn't have the range that the students do. But if she could wear a cordless microphone, that would be wonderful. This is in the future, but they say it's coming. In our preschool, we have something new this year, which is called a vibrating floor. We have a large vibrator, or sound vibrator, which is merely a box with 2 great big speakers in it. And this sits on the floor, on a wooden floor that has been built up like a stage in our preschool. This is attached to a record player and an amplifier with a microphone. And the children, when they are in class session, sit on this false floor or little stage with the teacher and have their lessons. They are bombarded not only by hearing that they get through their headsets, but by vibration which comes up through the floor. And this has been amazing to me to watch the development of speech. They try to say everything the teacher does, and they do a pretty good job in that they get the syllables right. They don't always get the sounds right yet, but the syllables are there. When they say goodbye, or bye-bye, which they say, it's bye-bye. It isn't bye-bye, 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 on and on. When they say banana, they know when to cut it off with a certain number of syllables. Their names are so much easier to understand. We have one little girl whose name is Adele. Well, when she enrolled in school this fall, I thought, well, why didn't you name her something else? Because she'll never learn to say that. But she has learned to say Adele, and it's understandable. When they count, they get the rhythm of counting, and the sequence seems to come through easier to them. It has done so much that we would like to have one in each classroom. Not only has it done a lot for the little children, but the older children drop in every noon and turn the record player on and dance and love it because they can really feel the vibration through this floor. And we're supposed to have it carpeted. It's not carpeted as yet. And the teenagers all come in and say, don't put any carpet on there, we want to dance, but they're going to wear out the floor before we get the use out of it if we don't get it carpeted. Another thing that we have to do with our youngsters, besides speech and lip reading, is to teach the subject matter, of which the most difficult is language. I would like to read you again something that Helen Keller said in my presence at one time. Helen Keller says, deafness is the most severe of all handicaps. Even blindness cannot compare. Deafness robs a person of the most important stimulus of ideas, that of the sound of human voices. It robs him of the development of language from which thoughts and ideas materialize. It limits his thinking to visual clues. This, to me, is the most difficult task of all of the teaching I have ever done, is to get language across to deaf youngsters. You think about a deaf child in the beginning, and he's learning words. This is easy, because it's something that you can show him. I mean, concrete words. You can show him a doll, or you can show him a shoe, or you can show him how to jump, or you can show him blue. You can even show him numbers. But once you get away from the concrete, how can you show a deaf child the word was? Or many, many, many thousands of words that you can think of. how can you show him? It's merely by experience that you have to teach these youngsters the meaning of language. They have to experience things, go out into the world and experience them. We cannot teach deaf children within the four walls of a building. If you're going to teach a child about the fire station or the whatever you call them, they have to go and visit it. If you're going to teach a child about making bread, you have to make it, or anything else. If you're going to teach a child about animals, you have to visit a farm. Later on, I'm going to show you a few pictures, which I took myself, so don't expect a professional job. But they do show you some of the things that we have to do with deaf children in order to get meaning of language across to them. Meaningful reading is another thing that, of course, is very closely connected to language. I would like to show you this. I don't know how well you at the back can see it, but I would like to bet you can read it. Well, this is what reading looks like to a deaf child, because he has no background for it, you see. Now, I've given you pictures here, and a deaf child has pictures in a book too, but that's not much help. So this is really reading. I mean, you could read this if you knew what the symbols were. But so could a deaf child read if he knew what the symbols were, or if he knew what the words meant when he knows the symbols. But this is the problem that teachers have to watch out for, because a deaf child may pick up a French book and start to read. If he gets his language, his phonetic language well enough, you see, he may start to read some of the words, but the words don't mean anything to him. And lots of times I've had a teacher, a young, inexperienced teacher, come into me and she'd say, "Oh, Johnny can read this whole book." And I said, "Good, let me hear it." So Johnny will read for me. And I will say, "Johnny, who put the dog out in the yard?" You see, he can pronounce the words, but the words have no meaning for him. And this is what we have to watch out for in teaching language. I told the group this afternoon one word which happened to me just last week, which will illustrate a little bit how the youngsters misinterpret language. This was about a 5th grade class, and I just walked into the room for something, and they looked up at me and said, "Miss Caldwell penetrated the room." And the teacher said, "Oh my." She said, "I had them look up the word in the dictionary, and it said pass through." And so this is their application to it. So you see, even the dictionary meaning is not always helpful to the deaf child. You have to go beyond this in order to teach them language, especially language that has all of the idioms that we have. Another thing that we have to teach our youngsters is to be to accept their handicap. Now, this is a very difficult thing to do. We start right from the very beginning, making a child very proud of himself, proud of his speech, proud of the way he looks, and proud of the way he walks. We have an association in Dayton. I don't know whether you use Dance Incorporated here or not. It is the professional dance teachers donate a certain amount of time to handicapped children, and this is almost a worldwide endeavor, I believe. They donate a certain amount of time to children who are handicapped in teaching them to dance. Now this is really not dancing per se, but it is body management. We have 3 classes a week of dance, as the youngsters call it, for our youngsters between the ages of preschool and 9. Because at 9 we can put our children in the public school gym classes, but not before, you see. So these youngsters, before they can go into the gym classes, have dance. And they love this program. Not only does it help them balance better and walk better, but it makes them very alert as to what's going on around them. They have to watch this dancing teacher very closely, you see. They get to perform different places, such as at the University of Dayton, and sometimes downtown at a hotel, and this makes them very proud. And of course the teachers encourage them in this pride. We have our school nurse is a stickler for nice teeth. We all like nice teeth, but we make our children very proud of their teeth and try to encourage them to keep them well brushed and white. And this makes the teachers happier too, because they have to work pretty close into the mouth sometimes, you know. So this is a very big program in our school. As they grow older, we try to teach them proper dress styles and so forth, and combing their hair and this type of thing. We teach them behavior on the bus. Now these youngsters at the age of 9 in Dayton, the ones who live in Dayton, are put on the city buses and must come to school on the bus. We try to teach them manners, behavior, and if they don't behave, it's usually reported to me by somebody, and then we have another lesson. So that the youngsters are really pretty self-assured by the time they get into high school, and this is what we want. We try to tell them all along the way that they must go 2/3 of the way if they're going to be accepted by a hearing society, because they are in the minority. There are fewer deaf people in the world than anywhere else, than other types of people, and that they have to go out of their way to be accepted. That hearing people are not going to take the time to bother with them if they aren't better on their job, and if they don't do better than the hearing person does. With this in mind, and this type of training, we have choices of in the high schools for the youngsters. They may either take college training, college preparatory work, if this is where they're going to go. They may go into the work-study group, which is handled through rehabilitation, or they may be in our slow learning section, which is a terminating class. No matter where these children, what choice they have made, they will be handled through rehabilitation in some manner or another. Rehabilitation helps us with job finding or with college expenses in some cases, or if the child has to work in a closed workshop or the Goodwill, as it is in Dayton, the rehabilitation works with this child after he's through school and sees that he is placed in the proper training program for him. We have very few deaf children in our area that are out of school now that are not either in college or gainfully employed. I don't believe I could mention more than one, and this is a multiple handicapped child who is not employed in some way. And I have keep pretty close tabs on all of them. We have wonderful people in Dayton who go out of their way to help deaf youngsters. Many of our hearing aids have been donated to us by interested group. This does not come all through Board of Education funds. Most, in fact, I would say most of our hearing aids have been bought by the Lions Club or this club or that, donating money. And National Cash Register in Dayton have purchased the audiometer for the school, and most of the equipment that is used has been purchased through interested parties outside of the school. And lately, of course, we've been receiving government aid in receiving overhead projectors and film strip machines and so forth. Our children, even at a young age, are encouraged to go into Little League baseball or Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. The children who live outside have the, what is the farmers group? The 4-H club. And actually these children are pretty well accepted. Through our program of dance, the youngsters in our school have learned to dance very well. And especially this new, they can really do it. So when the youngsters are into clubs and so forth outside, it's a pretty sure thing that it's our youngsters who are teaching the hearing youngsters, you see, these types of dances and so forth, because our youngsters have it at a little earlier age. And so this is one thing that makes them accepted. Then they are good at sports, they like sports, and they are good sports. So they're accepted for this reason too. We have excellent publicity in Dayton, which I think is very good for any school. The newspaper has always been very kind to me, and I have tried to keep good relationships with them so that they will give us the publicity that we need. Not that we need any more children, I don't mean this, but it helps the school to be known and to grow if they get nice publicity. So this is one clue that I feel is important to any school, that they must do things that they can make known to the public, and then it must get to the public through the newspapers. Any type of program that we have gets very good coverage usually, with pictures and a nice article written about it. And it is amazing the nice donations we get made to the school sometimes from people that I don't even know. But they will say, I saw your article in the paper and I would like to help with the purchase of your next hearing aid. And they will make a donation to the school, which is very helpful. Now, if we could have the pictures, I think you will see through some of the pictures an explanation of some of the things I've been telling you. I will try to tell you about these youngsters. This is a little 4-year-old girl coming to school for the first time, and we were all kind of amused at her big school book. She'd never been to school before. Okay. Oh, I moved this one over. Didn't it work? Oh. This child is coming to school the first day. This is the entrance of our school. That out the door there is the front playground, the little children use. And she is coming into school with her big school bag. Never having been in school before, it amused us, so we took a picture of her. and that happens to be J. Warren equipment, of the old style. This is the kindergarten room, however, and she is getting speech sounds from the child using vibration and touch, and the child has the hearing aid on. I don't believe you can see it in this picture, but there is also a little light that figures attached to this machine. This is not a walk-away, however. This is a lip reading lesson, and these youngsters have had several weeks in school and have learned to lip read 6 words, it looks like. Another lip reading lesson. In this case, I believe they have colored some pictures of objects that they know and are reviewing them as the teacher has asked them to give them back the objects that they have drawn. These youngsters had a speech lesson, and then I guess the teacher turned aside and they decided to continue helping each other. You notice the feather. This is for making the breath sound, like the P, T, and K, which we call, of course, these are just some curious youngsters who stuck their noses into the office to see what was going on. There is any significance to this. But they are very curious about new children who come, and if they see anyone new coming into the building, they follow them into the office to see what's going on. This is the preschool, and it's a cooking experiment. That they're concocting some things. Okay. Next. This is more of the same process. They're mixing and stirring and using different implements, different kinds of dishes, having a wonderful time. I think the next one shows the finished product. Yeah, there it is. I don't want that green stuff in the bowl. This is hearing through the hearing aid for the first time. This little boy. In our testing room, we have tile walls, and it reflects terrifically on the pictures. So that's why the faces look a little bit dark. Or else it's because I'm a poor photographer, I don't know. But this child, this is the first time he's ever had a hearing aid on. And he had such a broad smile, such a broad grin, that I had to take a picture of him. He loved it. Now, here are some youngsters again on the setup of the old type hearing aid that we had, using the horses and the jack boxes and the wires which held them down to their seats. But now we have, of course we have this in the bulk of our reading yet, but we do have 6 rooms that are equipped with the booth. We have the services of a school doctor and a nurse. The doctor is on call if needed, and she does check the children, or he is a man doctor now, but we check the children once every year. The nurse is there every week and does anything that we think needs to be done, and follows through on cases too. In this case, the doctor is trying to get the heartbeat, and everybody here is trying to help that child breathe. It's quite a job, because you can't tell that child to take a deep breath. These 2 little youngsters are now in public school, doing full-time public school work. They have a hearing loss of the one on the left has a hearing loss of 70 decibels in both ears, and the one in the red, she's the one on the right, isn't she? The one in the red has a hearing loss of 85 decibels. They're both very intelligent youngsters, and they both lost their hearing from illness at the age of 2.5 and 3. But it didn't take them long to learn language and speech, and adequately enough that they could go back to the public school and carry the full load. We do not know whether they'll be able to remain through high school, but right now they are in 4th grade and doing very well. Okay. They have the walkaways on too, as you can see. This is the first type of walkaway, which is the day worn. And they have a little carrying case, which those little boxes that they're holding fits into, and they wear those. This is the first time that we had this loop system put in, and these youngsters were in the classroom that had it. These are buddies from the same class, and they were waiting on the wall, getting ready to go out for a trip to the farm. This is an older group who had taken a science trip out to Germantown Dam. Maybe some of you are familiar with that area. It is a beautiful area, and if you go to the next picture, you can see some of these singing things from the water, you see, and turning over rocks and so forth. This is more of the same science trip. This happens to be this year's Christmas play. The youngsters portrayed Christmas in many lands. And this group of children did the Mexican Christmas to, what is that old music that's popular now? I can't remember the name of it, but no. Tijuana Brass, I think that is it. And they did the dance to this, and the Mexican hat there on the floor, they danced around the Mexican hat, and then they broke the piñata, you see, out there. And candy was, the little rack of candy was in the piñata, and it fell to the floor, and the youngsters picked it up and threw it out to the audience, which was quite a thrill for all the children in the audience. This is another section of the same play, the same program. These are the English carolers, and these are youngsters in the 1st grade. They look tall, but it must have been the angle I took it from. But you would have been amazed to hear them sing Christmas carols and jingle bells and several things of this sort. Singing is really choral reading, reading to music. But their timing was so wonderful because they had been trained on this vibrating floor, I will say. But it really was very surprising that they could do as well as they did. This is was the night before Christmas, and nothing was stirring, not even a mouse. And the little mouse there happens to be the little Adele from Connersville, Indiana, who was adopted by her aunt and lives in Centerville now. On the last day of school, we have a program that all the children and the parents dearly love. It's kind of a show and tell day. And the youngsters do anything they want to do, or anything the teacher wants them to. And the older youngsters show their artwork, home ec word and shop word this time. This is the gathering of the clan, you see, for the program that's about to take place. The dance class is also put on program on this day, and it's all held outdoors. Here are the youngsters from the shop classes showing some of the things that they have made. These boys are probably 12 years old. Girls have made aprons, it looks like, and they are wearing them, showing the mothers and the fathers. Now this is a part of Dance Incorporated, and this year the youngsters had Snow White. These are the dwarfs, you see. And it was all done in dance and pantomime, and it was a darling story. They also did it for the classes at the University of Dayton that were held that summer, and this class had dance teachers from all over the world. India and Holland, every place for here. Another scene from the Seventh War. I told you that we had to show and act out every type of thing that we do or want to teach about. So this is eating with chopsticks, teaching some Chinese or Japanese special things about it. This is a farm trip, and the youngsters, we have the National Autism Society, you know, and in connection with this is the Children's Farm, and we can make field trips there anytime we want to arrange them. And in the spring, it's very nice to go because the children get to pet the baby animals. And ride on the farm wagons. This is a trip to Alwood Audubon Society, or Natural Society, a natural area it is. The children were collecting grasshoppers that day, and the little boy there has a chicken leg in one hand and a grasshopper in the other. This is the leader at the Audubon Society in Dayton, one of the leaders there, who's showing the children. I think they were looking at an Oriole's nest there. And this is a field trip for collecting maple syrup, or for seeing how maple syrup is collected. And of course we have to have Santa Claus. This is our usually the way our youngsters learn to sing, and this is Christmas singing, and that is by standing around the piano and feeling with their hands on the piano. They feel the beat of it, and then they follow the direction of the teacher and speak with the music. And it's surprising how clearly it sounds like they're carrying a tune. But if you hear it without the music, you know they weren't carrying a tune. But their timing is good when they do it this way. Another part of the Christmas play. Each class does some little thing, you know. This is, but I see he's got a banjo. But it isn't one that really plays, it's pretending. And they probably are singing something to you. These are some youngsters, college youngsters, who are back to visit. Once we have a child in Kennedy, I don't think he ever really graduates because they keep coming back, and all three of these students are Gallaudet. And every vacation they visit us, they come back to Kennedy to visit us as well as their own parents. To the boys and girls who leave school and marry, always bring their children back for us to see. So it's very close-knit school, as you can see. I mean, we never really get too far apart from each other. About once in every 5 years, we take a train trip to Cincinnati to the zoo. And this is at the zoo. The youngsters are riding the little train at the zoo. This is the teacher. The teacher has the darkest skirt on, and some of her youngsters, they aren't all there. One class. Probably about a 6th grade class. There's some little children looking at the polar bears, I believe. And this is just about the end of the day, and a few of us got a little bit tired. Sat down. The giraffes were just most accommodating. They really would eat right in your hand. We did not get too safe, but nobody got bit. And this is inside the train. The picture isn't good, but you see our youngsters use these pictures for recalling experiences. And I wanted something that could remind them of the inside of the train. But my flash equipment was not big enough to take a bright picture on an area as large as that. And we always have Halloween parties for the teenagers, you see, and prizes are given for the best get-up. These two happen to win that time. Sometimes when I had the camera ready to take pictures of a Christmas play or something of the sort, I see the children in the hall, and I think maybe the pictures are a little bigger taken away from what's going on than if you wait till they're on the stage. Here they are sitting in anticipation of getting their turn on the stage, you see. And all of their hands are placed so firmly on their knees because they can hardly contain themselves. They want to get in there and get going. The little boy about 4th from the left in, with his mouth wide open, happens to be the most brilliant one in that class. He doesn't look it, I know, but he is. And this is the preschool class of youngsters waiting out in the hall for their turn, too. Got their little baby. If I could answer any questions on anything, I would be glad to do so.
I would imagine that once your students are enrolled in Kennedy, they can stay there. Would you have a guess as to how many children might move away or move far enough away that they are no longer eligible for attendance activity or no longer feasible for them to come in?
Very few. Sometimes we do get children. Now we do have the children of the personnel at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and sometimes we have those for 3 years, and then they move because the father's time is up. And we have a little child now whose father is in Vietnam, and his wife is Japanese. So she didn't want to stay in Dayton, you see. She went back to San Francisco, where her parents live, and she took her little boy. But she writes me practically 3 times a year that she can hardly wait until her husband gets back so they can come back to the Dayton.
Because I think there are lots of Wright-Patterson families who stay
Yeah,
on
we
vacation after
we have quite a few that are transferred. I understand we're to get 2 from Japan this year. I don't know the Japanese children, probably not, but at least they are living in Japan now, and they have not been in school as such. They've been having some private work, but they are school age now. Yes, we do get quite a few children, and sometimes they request extended time, you see, so the children can stay there in school. However, we do transfer some of these youngsters out to different schools. Some in the East, we have one youngster who was transferred to Frederick, Maryland last year, but not too many.
What type of psychological testing do you use before you attain the 4 years middle age, and is the child entitled to a retest and so forth? Would you enlarge on this?
In the spring of the year, we have what we call a spring roundup. Usually it starts in March sometime. And all of the youngsters who are on the waiting list for Kennedy School are brought to school during this week sometime. And they are seen by the school nurse, by the psychologist, by the head of special education, by the visiting teacher, and by an audiologist if we feel this is necessary, if the audiological tests have not already been made. And this child is given a psychological at this time by a Dayton School Board psychologist. She uses a lighter, as since this has been the test that's been chosen by the State Department to be most revealing. I don't know that I agree, but they like it. So we get a lighter test on these youngsters. Now, she just gives samplings at this age, however, and it's all performance. All of the tests is performance. The child may, sometimes, if the child is 3 years and 8 months old, may test 4 or 5 years, you see. And of course we will take that child. But if the child is 3 years and 8 months old and test 3, we will say he should remain at the Hearing and Speech Center until he tests a little higher, you see.
That will be the next spring round?
Well, yes, usually.
And
Now, if the child is 5 or 6, you see, we have to take him.
Okay, that's...
Regardless of the test, we have to take him.
Okay, I didn't understand.
But we don't, what I mean is we don't have to take a child who is under age,
I understand.
if he doesn't measure up to the mentality.
Your comment about probably having some 4-year-old youngsters next fall could lead one to think that this may or may not be the case where you're beginning to feel this pressure of space. Now, you've expanded into Patterson School, probably with some of the older classes. Assuming that you do have 40 people, 40 students who want to come in, all of whom, let's let's say, would take a lighter and pass it at the 4-year reach level, MA level. What kinds of things are you planning to try to cope with the situation?
We're doing teacher recruiting right now.
Tonight.
And we are planning, of course there is a building program in Dayton, as there is everywhere, I guess, but perhaps you know our school levy bill did not pass last time. So therefore this has curtailed a great deal of the building. But I know that Mr. McDougall was meeting with the board today and planning for these 40 youngsters. He had been out at the Hearing and Speech Center a couple of days ago and had seen the situation, the number of children, and understands that they are really flesh and blood, you see. I've been telling him this all year, but he hasn't swallowed it yet. But now he knows. Pardon me. So he really is getting a little bit bothered, and he talked a little to me yesterday about a temporary. Well, I suppose it will come to that, I don't know. But we have very little playground left. I don't know whether they're going to put a temporary building and then have children that have to have some playground area, you know. I don't know. The only thing that I could possibly see is that they would probably put a few children from Patterson into a church, as they do sometimes, you see, and let us have more space there. They don't like that, but it could be done.
Suppose you were to the point of needing all the space in Patterson.
I hope this never happens.
Patterson would become completely Kennedy.
I hope this never happens because we need these hearing children. We need the association. See, our youngsters may not, all of them, get to take classes with hearing youngsters, but they all get to take gym with hearing youngsters. And they see them on the playground. And we have plenty of fights. I don't mean that it's all pleasant, but it is life. And I would not like to see a school for the deaf as just school for the deaf. Or we might as well go back to Columbus. We have to have this association with the hearing children. Any other questions?
Now, some of them go to a junior high school.
We do not have junior high schools in Dayton, you see, but we do have youngsters who can take the full program at Patterson. That is in the 7th and 8th grade. We will have a class of youngsters, part of the class of youngsters, who will be able to start taking the rotating class 6th, 7th, and 8th grade next year at Patterson.
But you have a supporting teacher that follows into the high school that the child goes.
Yes, because the child never goes over there for all subjects, unless we put it, if that's the case, we put him out in his own school district.
If he goes to his own school district, does this supporting teacher follow through as far as?
If he goes to his own school district, he's on his own, except for the help of his parents and for the help of a hired tutor if he needs it.
And how does the regular school district accept him, generally speaking, and they are they received?
Well, this takes a good deal of work. And this happens to be one of my jobs, is to prepare the receiving school district for this child. And I go several times during the preceding year.
Then you serve the supporting role in that case. I mean, the tie is directed.
That's I do that before the child goes, and then I make follow-up visits on the child too. This should not be my job, however, but it is. Maybe someday it won't be.
You spoke of keeping rather close tabs on your graduates. Do you find by and large they integrate themselves in the hearing society, or do they become a subculture even from Kennedy?
No, I would say that mostly they integrate in the hearing society. A good many of our youngsters, our girls, have married hearing boys. And this is almost amazing. In fact, I could hardly believe it would lead to happiness myself. But it has. I can put my finger on about half a dozen who have married hearing men and have gotten along beautifully. These girls happen to be very beautiful girls, and they happen to be pretty oral, nice speech. In fact, one girl, you would almost say she's French or something of this sort, or she just has a slight accent, which is very delightful. She can talk very well and even does some public speaking.
How many deaf men have married hearing women?
I can't name any of the group that I know. So now, of course, they are happier, I think, with their own society. And our students tend to, especially these that go to Gallaudet, tend to have kind of a little group that when they are at home, they have their parties, which includes all of these youngsters. These are the youngsters who are probably the brightest that we have ever had. Now we do have, as I think maybe I mentioned, 3 students who are in colleges for hearing children. These are all very oral. However, they're all very deaf. In fact, one of the boys went to our Fairview High School, and he was a child that I started when he was 3.5 years old in school, and I thought I would never teach him. I thought I would never teach him to lip read to begin with. He was so stubborn and so hard to manage, and so uninterested in anything that took any time that I didn't think he would ever learn to lip read. Well, when he left me, went on into the first grade or kindergarten, and then I became principal, you see. Well, I was responsible for him, and I talked pretty frankly to his mother, his only child, and I said, he's spoiled for one thing, and you're going to have to settle him down a little bit to make him want to work. By the time the child was 9 years old and ready to ride the buses to school, I usually tell the youngsters that they can bring comic books back and forth to school, you see, because this keeps them quiet on the bus. And this child, when I told him he could bring a comic book to school, came the first day with Time magazine under his arm. So I knew that we had something here. So we really, this child is now a senior at Ohio University, and is really, he went to Fairview High School, which is the stiffest high school that we have, and made a B average. He's really pretty good.
Don't you really think, though, that how much they communicate with the hearing world depends on their speech and how well they can communicate?
This is very
Because
true.
the more that the child uses his speech, it seems like the more he integrates with the hearing.
This is very true. And with we might as well face it, with the slow or deaf child, you don't get this kind of speech. You have an average or above average deaf child, you can usually get pretty good speech from them, but not always with the slow.
You mentioned earlier that before graduating,
I can't hear you.
I think
But before we're graduating. Before graduating, yes.
roughly your average, your yearly average.
Well, no, it all depends. just so happens that there are 4 that are ready this year. Last year, we had only 2. And the year before that, we had 8. So it just all depends on how they are, how they get along.
About how old are these children who are graduating?
One girl is 20, and the other 2 are 19, and the one boy is, he's 19 too. 19.
From your pictures there, I sort of got the idea that you have more girls than boys, do you?
It seems as though we do.
And that's unusual.
However, the picture is changing just a little now. We're getting more
There's
boys.
no selectivity factor in that.
No. No, I don't know how it happens, but for a while our classes were predominantly girls, 8 to 2 or something like this. But now we're getting more boys, more of a predominance of boys in the lower grade. No, we can't select in any way. They're there.
Well, no, I think there's a natural selection,
Oh.
possibly on the parents.
But is there a difference in the learning ability or the improvement between girls and boys?
No, I don't think so.
Do you have any classes through the department?
Our children in the last 2 or 3 years have been attending Head Start and Spear with hearing children. And we like this very much because not only does it give our youngsters a chance to take part in these classes, the wonderful field trips they have, the wonderful experiences they have, but it teaches a public school teacher who's handling this child that there are other types of children in the world. And in nearly every instance, I have had a good report from these teachers of these youngsters saying, how did you ever teach them? And well, they could read better than the youngsters that we had here. And how did you do it? So it's really encouraging to have them take part in these programs.
Thank you very much for calling. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.